When we read poetry, we don't just read for the literal meaning of what the author has written. We often have to analyze what the author is telling us in order to determine some sort of message that the author or the poet is trying to teach us. In this case, we're reading the poem Fame is a Fickle Food by Emily Dickinson. In this presentation, you'll see 5 photos to help you better understand what Emily Dickinson meant to teach us in her poem. In this first picture, you're seeing stars in the night sky. Emily Dickinson tells us in her poem that fame is a fickle food upon a shifting plate, whose table once a guest but not, the second time is set. Emily Dickinson is trying to show us that fame is unpredictable. One person could be famous one day and then lose their fame the next day. In the same way, stars can burn out. In the same way that celebrities and their fame can burn out. So it's very unpredictable. We don't know what fame might bring us, and we don't know when it may or may not end, in the same way that stars in the night sky burn out unpredictably. Emily Dickinson is comparing fame to food. In the next section of the poem, she says, whose crumbs the crows inspect. In this photo, you're seeing a crumb. So after you lose your fame, you're not left with very much. Maybe with just some crumbs, which aren't very nourishing, and they don't fill you with the nutrients that you need to feel full in life. And so in the same way, fame can just leave us with crumbs. In the next photo, what you're seeing here is a crow, which a crow is mentioned in the poem. And sometimes crows can be thought of as being maybe scary or sneaky, but in this case, Emily Dickinson is trying to tell us that crows are pretty smart. When she says, whose crumbs the crows inspect, and with ironic caw, flap past it to the farmer's corn. So even the crow won't eat the crumb because it knows that it isn't good for it. It isn't going to nourish it. So in this photo, what you're seeing is that the crow is actually a lot smarter than you might think. It's able to open up the box and get to the food. So in this case, crows or animals are kind of outsmarting us. She's kind of saying that even a crow would know not to go after something that isn't good for you. In the next photo, what you're seeing is paparazzi taking photos of celebrities. Emily Dickinson is trying to tell us in the poem that fame isn't always necessarily what it's cracked up to be. It isn't always as great as it seems. So in this picture, celebrities might feel a lot of intense pressure of having people always following them around and taking pictures of them. In the last photo, what you're seeing is a man chasing after a carrot on a stick. Now, in this picture, he'll probably never get the carrot, but he's going to keep chasing after it because he wants it. So he's not being very smart about it, which is kind of what Emily Dickinson is telling us in her poem, that men eat of it and die, right? So chasing after fame, running after something that they'll never get, isn't very productive. They're not getting very much out of it in the same way that the man is chasing after a carrot in the photo. So overall, in Fame is a Fickle Food, Emily Dickinson is trying to show us that just like the stars, fame can burn out, and it doesn't leave us feeling very full in life, like with crumbs. And even a crow wouldn't just eat crumbs, right? It's smarter than that. It knows how to do more than that. And even if you were to get famous, it's not necessarily everything it's cracked up to be. It might be very stressful. It might bring you a lot of pressure. And then finally, you might be chasing something that's unattainable, something that you couldn't necessarily easily get or might not necessarily ever get. And so that is our summary of Fame is a Fickle Food by Emily Dickinson.